Life without rules is just chaos, and CAD is no different. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the rules of CAD, also known as constraints. So let the lesson begin. In the last lesson, we talked about the toolbox within Autodesk Fusion and where our tools are located. This time, we're going to be talking about one specific drawer within that toolbox, the constraints drawer. So if we kind of pop over here, those constraints are just rules within Fusion. And we have to remember that those rules are what's going to kind of keep things from having full chaos, kind of falling apart over time. One important thing to remember as we're going to go over the next two lessons, the next one being dimensions, this one being constraints, is that we're looking for a fully defined sketch. And the way that we know that is that we're having features like lines and circles turn black in color instead of blue in color as we're doing it. So as we're going to jump into Autodesk Fusion right now, I want you to kind of be paying attention, and I'll be calling it out as we're defining certain features. So we're going to come in here and we're going to go back up to that ribbon that we talked about in the previous lesson, and we're going to create sketch, and we're going to select on that plane. So we're building off those previous lessons using a lot of these tools. Now we're going to come in here and we're going to create two lines. So we're going to go to create and we're going to go to line, and we can draw a line at some random angle, right? I like to use the escape button, or you can click OK here. But escape ends up kind of popping out of that feature. It allows you kind of to go to the next, if you're going to go from a line to a circle to a square, it kind of allows you to select the next thing. We're going to also do another line here. And so we can see here this little L next to it. That's one of those pin shortcuts. So we can create those shortcuts through doing that. So I can also click the button L on my keyboard, and that'll create another line. So I'm going to select another line at a random angle. So again, what we talked about at the beginning, blue equals undefined, completely can change in the background. I can check this by clicking and dragging. I can move this line anywhere on the page. I can also change the orientation of it and the angle, completely independent. Now, we can go up to that ribbon or that toolbox again, and we can show our constraints. There's a little drop-down menu. We can see we have a handful of constraints. Again, homework for this lesson is to go through and read each one of the tooltips for those constraints so you kind of understand what's available to you as you're making your drawings. In this one, what I want to do is I want to make these two lines parallel to each other. And so we're going to use the parallel constraint. So we're going to click on parallel, and it's as easy as just clicking on this line and saying that I want it parallel with this line. Now, one important thing to note is that whatever you click on first, the second one will orientate itself to the first one. And so a lot of times when you have an undefined sketch, it doesn't really matter. The whole thing is floating in space, but it's good to note that whatever you click on first is going to kind of drive the second one. So now, as I move this around, you can see that I can kind of move these in any orientation. They're still completely blue. I can move them anywhere, but they're now relative to each other. They're parallel. The next thing that I want to show is that what we can do is make one of these lines horizontal. So there is a tool in here that's horizontal or vertical. One important thing to note, and we can go to the whiteboard here, is that in space, if I draw this line, if I make it a little, if this is horizontal, if this line right here is more than 45 degrees, it will make, if I click on the horizontal or vertical constraint, it will make it vertical. If it's less than 45 degrees, it'll make it horizontal. So you kind of need to have this line if you're going to use that constraint within a relative amount of the direction that you want it to be going in the background. So on this one right here, these ones are relatively probably about 20 degrees. So if I click on one of these lines, it's going to flatten it out to be horizontal. So let's bounce back into the CAD and do that. So on this feature, this constraint, we are only going to select one line. So I can select horizontal, vertical. And we're going to select this bottom line here. When I select that, flattens out that line, just like what we intended to do. One important thing though is that since the other one was parallel, it also made it horizontal. And this is the power of constraints in the background. I can have two constraints, and now I can have multiple things kind of happening in the background that no matter what now, both lines are parallel to each other and both lines are horizontal, and I've done it with 2 constraints. So I've done 3 kind of features with 2 kind of rules in the background. Again, I can move these around. So everything is blue, everything is undefined within space on the absolute coordinate system relative to that origin. So everything is still chaos within my drawing. The next constraint that is really important is coincident. Now this one is based on points. And what I'm going to do is I want my point of my bottom right one, or bottom right line, to be attached to the origin. So I'm going to do coincident, and then I'm going to select those 2 points. So the bottom right and then my origin, that snaps it down. Now, one really important thing to note here is that now my bottom line is black across the length of the line, but the end dot is still blue. I can still move it anywhere I want in length. So I haven't determined the full length of that part yet, but I've said that it is now horizontal and attached to the origin on one side. So I can see that this dot right here is black, and this dot over here is white, so I can move it around. This line is still free floating, right? So it's horizontal, it's parallel to the other one, but completely random. The next constraint, and you can kind of see how I'm building these out, is I want to show that these 2 lines are now equal to each other. So equal in length is what I'm kind of talking about here. So I'm going to select that equal. I'm going to select this line, and they're going to automatically turn into the same length. So now if I change the length of my bottom line, my top line's length changes, and they're always the same. Now, this is there's a lot of different reasons in which you'd want these 2 lines to be equal, or those kind of constraints as we're building this out. We're not drawing anything in particular. I'm just showing how these constraints, these rules interact with each other, and how you can kind of imagine that these are going to work with each other in the background. I'm going to draw one more line in here, and we're going to end up kind of fully defining this sketch. This line I'm going to draw in at a random angle up here in kind of no man's land. We're going to go over the last 2 constraints that I'm going to go over in this lesson. The first one being midpoint. It's this little triangle up here. We can go to do the drop-down menu. We can come down here to midpoint. Now this specifically is exactly like what it sounds like. If I select the point of that in a line, it's going to put that point on the middle of that line. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Select midpoint, my point, and we're going to come down here to the line that's down here. I can select anywhere on this line, and it's going to snap it to the middle of it. We're going to do that one more time to the top one. So we're going to select this, go up, and select the other line that snaps a midpoint. Now everything's still blue, but you can see this line is now attached to the 2. I can change the length of these, and this always snap to the middle. We're going to do one last thing, and we're going to make it so that there is a perpendicular component to these. So I want the vertical line, or the one that's running kind of up at an angle, to be perpendicular with the bottom one. So we're going to select this line and this line after selecting perpendicular, snaps it up. And now I can't move my lines left or right anymore. I can only move it up and down, and I can only change the length. So you can kind of see how these rules are tightening up what we can do. Now, lastly, the only thing we can do is add dimensions to this to fully define it, to get everything to turn black. So we're going to stop here on this part. We're going to continue that with the next lesson where we're going to add dimensions. So we'll see you on that one.